Hello and welcome back to the Great British History course. This episode will look at one of Britain's lesser known wars, the War of 1812. The imaginatively named War of 1812 was fought by the United States of America against Britain, Canada, and Native Americans under Tecumseh. The conflict commenced on the 18th of June 1812, when America declared war on Great Britain. There were multiple reasons for the war. Firstly, American expansionist feelings were on the rise, leading to hopes of gaining Canadian territory. Secondly, America was angered by Britain's encouragement of the Native Americans to resist American expansion. Thirdly, the impressment of American citizens by the Royal Navy to fight against France in the Napoleonic Wars sparked outrage in the United States, even though many of these citizens were British subjects hoping to avoid the conflict. Finally, Britain had restricted America's trade with Europe through measures such as the Orders in Council, that required all American vessels heading for Europe first dock and pay tax in Britain, thereby damaging the US export economy. It should be known that the new Prime Minister, Lord Liverpool, had actually abolished the Orders in Council before war broke out between the two nations, but news of this had failed to reach America until after war was declared. Whilst America had the immediate military advantage, as the majority of the British Army was serving in the Peninsular War under Wellington, the American forces were poorly trained, poorly paid, and poorly led, ensuring that their initial invasion of Canada under General Hull proved a failure, forcing the Americans to retreat south. The British and their Native American allies, under Brock and Tecumseh respectively, pursued the Americans to besiege a numerically superior force at Detroit. To make up for this, Brock used the genius tactics of making his militia dress in worn-out uniforms to appear as though they were experienced regulars. He crafted marches to falsify the size of his army, and he ordered the Native Americans to stand before the besieged, advancing and retreating with war cries as an intimidation tactic. This all proved to be extremely effective, as, after a brief artillery barrage, the garrison surrendered Fort Detroit, giving the British the city. A second invasion of Canada commenced in October, though it too was repulsed at the Battle of the Queenston Heights, although Brock himself was killed in the action. In the following year, a third invasion, this time aimed at Montreal, was planned, yet it too ended in failure. The American offensive in 1813 proved slightly more effective, as American forces were able to briefly capture the city of York, modern-day Toronto, burning the public buildings to the ground. The primary causes of America's troubles during these invasions was having poorly trained commanders and troops, and great difficulties in supplying their forces adequately. The Americans did attain their first victory of the war at the Battle of Lake Erie, where 9 vessels under Oliver Perry defeated and captured 6 British ships under Robert Barclay. The battle was hard fought, but Perry achieved victory through transferring from his destroyed flagship Lawrence to the Niagara and sailing it directly into the British fleet, delivering devastating broadsides. American control of Lake Erie cut off the Native Americans from the British allies and forced the British to abandon Detroit. The Americans then followed up this victory by crushing an inferior force of Native Americans and British troops retreating from Detroit at the Battle of the Thames. The British, ragged from their march and without cannon support, fled the field early in the battle, leaving the Native Americans under Tecumseh. After some stiff resistance, Tecumseh himself was killed, and, after word of his death spread, the Native Americans too fled. With Tecumseh gone, the Native American Confederation dissolved, with tribes only fighting on individually against the Americans for the remainder of the war. During this time, the Royal Navy had conducted a blockade of numerous American ports in an effort to stem American trade. However, they only carried out blockades in the south of the United States, as the North was dominated by the Federalist Party, who were pro-British and had refused to commit their militias to offensive actions. It was feared that a tight blockade would change the opinion of the Federalists, committing them to war against Britain. The blockade proved effective, with America's oceanic trade plummeting from $40 million in 1811 to $2.6 million in 1814. This was especially impressive, considering most of the British fleet was preoccupied with its blockade of France. The Americans did achieve some notable naval victories early in the war, with the famous USS Constitution and USS United States, separately capturing HMS Guerriere, HMS Macedonia, and HMS Java. These victories, however, simply resulted in more ships being deployed against the Americans, thereby tightening the blockade and failing to change any balance in the power struggle in the naval war. That concludes this episode on the War of 1812. Join us next time to see how Britain strikes back against America, and to view the conclusion of war itself, and the effects it had on all the nations who took part. Thank you for listening.